First of all, Sawadika, Sawadika. I'm really sad that I couldn't be there on site. I love Thailand. I'm now in a sunny but very cold Sweden. So I'm working as the field CTO for PulseSecure. So what I want to do today is take you through what we've seen as this new trend of work from home and the kind of the result of this pandemic that we're just going through, but also the kind of consequences and potentially where we're heading with this new normal. So we have conducted a couple of studies here, and if you look at what Gartner is saying to start with, is 74 of the CFOs surveyed expect actually some employees to continue working from home even after this pandemic ends. If you really dig into the data, it's 25% that actually expect 10%, and 70% will expect as much as 20% continue to work from home. So that's really an interesting theme that we start to see. Now, this really changed the entire attitude of this work from home. And actually, when we look at it now, we can see there is some very positive things as well, like 38% companies, they experienced actually productivity gains and other benefits to people that is actually getting more free and better lifetime because they don't have to travel and things. So that's going to be kind of a key thing. 84% anticipate this to be broader in the permanent program, especially employees are requesting this from their employees. And we also see kind of a more rapid deployment in order getting workflows into applications and into cloud to simplify this access from wherever you are. Now, we conducted actually a study, so you can actually download this from us, where we have done and basically consolidated this entire remote work from home cybersecurity report together with cybersecurity insiders. So if you haven't seen this or read this, I really think you should take your time and look into this in this documentation that we have here. Okay. Now, this massive work from home acceleration due to COVID-19 has some other kind of interesting things. If we look at pre-COVID, there was less than 25% of workforce working from home. In May 2020, it was more than 75%. We've seen customers, and I've personally been through customer cases where they called me on a Wednesday. They had 4,000 concurrent users with the capability to work from home. By Monday, they needed to be 40,000. So basically over a weekend, just the fact that we can now create these in virtual environments, we could actually rapidly meet the requirement. And by Monday morning, 40,000 users were working from remote. And that's a really proof of our commitment to this, but also to the kind of capacity that we can help customers with if needed in these challenging times. There's also been rapid adjustment to acceptable use policies, like what are the security and controls for on-premise versus remote users? And actually, most of them just adopted the same, up to 78%. But also, as people had to work from home, there's been an explosion in the allowing access from personal and unmanaged devices. So a lot of companies have now allowed people to use home PCs, home machines, as well as tablets and other types of smartphones to access corporate resources. That comes with a price, of course. Now, this also then fueled all the resilience and security challenges. So as we conducted these studies, the top 4 security challenges was actually mainly top user awareness. Do you understand that you're now no longer sitting in an office environment? Might be sitting in a much more open environment, and specifically around insecure home and public Wi-Fi has become one of the kind of challenges seen by companies. Use at risk of these personal devices is, of course, another kind of threat vector. Well, what is on those machines? Are they, sufficiently secure? Do they have a proper security software? Is it updated? And then at the end, sensitive data access and leakage. If you look at application exposures, we've seen file sharing as the biggest threat, web applications, but also video conferencing. And I'm fairly sure you've seen all these security vulnerabilities that's been popping up in all kinds of products, including ours. We've been seeing some new attack vectors on our products, and that's not really, that's expected when you see the use increase going from, as my example, 4 to 40,000 users. Of course, there's going to be more exposure, and the bad actors are really there to try to find new holes in the architecture to get in there. 33% of all the businesses across world was actually very badly prepared for something like this. And that has actually come as an afterthought from many of our customers, that we should probably have prepared ourselves better for things like this. This is not the first time we have a pandemic. We've had the bird flu. We've had other things in the past. PulseSecure has been offering the in case of emergency licensing for more than a decade, but many customers were completely taken off guard when this happened. And now I think that has been changed in all organizations, that there now need to be a very rigid process, and there need to be a built up preparation for things like a pandemic. 69% actually have very strong security concerns on what's happening right now, and with all these people working from home. So the attack vectors and the compliance exposures are greater than they've ever been. And the kind of top attack vectors are 72% around malware, 67% around phishing attacks, 59% unauthorized user and device access, and 44% unpatched systems. So looking at that, what's really needed here is a solution that covers all of these grounds to make sure that you can make sure that you're not allowing devices that are unpatched onto your system, to make sure you put measures in place, like for unauthorized user or device access, adding an MFA or multi-factor authentication or time-based token or something that makes sure that if you start to see people connecting from various locations. So one of the features we have, for example, is this adaptive authentication, where we can basically say if a user is all of a sudden logging in from a new place or from a new device, we can then act and enforce a multi-factor authentication. And that's really there to prevent credential theft, which is, of course, one of the bigger problems. Malware, let's validate that the machine has a functioning security software there before we allow any access. Those kind of things are crucial. Some companies also have compliance rules and regulations to follow. And of course, this shift has kind of shaken them in terms of how they meet things like, for me, being a European, GDPR, I'm fairly sure, it's even misspelled here by Manoar, who created the slide, so that's pretty funny. It should be GDPR. But you have your own regulations in Asia. I'm fairly sure there might be even specifics in Thailand. But you also have other global compliances like PCI and DSS that is very crucial to many of the companies in the merchandise and business environment and credit cards, etc. And HIPAA, another example. And as those kind of increases the risk, that is another thing to be very cautious about when you look at your business in these new challenging times. The action, though, around cybersecurity, I mean, 55% will continue to increase their kind of work from home secure access budget. That was not the case before COVID-19, but this is the result of understanding that they need to be prepared for these kind of things to happen. And I think most of the companies I talk to, they don't see this as a one-time situation or one-time thing. They are actually saying that COVID-19 might just be the first in many types of outbreaks, so they really want to be prepared going forward. If you look at the solutions employed, a lot of focus has been with companies around the antivirus and malware kind of deployment. Firewalls has been, specifically, I would say firewalls has not really been added, but more to add for expansion. All of a sudden their workforce or the kind of ingress speed and the capacity of a firewall was normally not really sized for having all of these users coming remotely and accessing the network. For us, 66% on the kind of SSL, VPN, and VPN environment has kind of expanded as well and being kind of deployed. multi-factor authentication high on the radar, and also backup solutions because users now remotely, if something bad happens to their machines, there need to be a very fast way of getting them back into business, getting their machine rebuilt, and getting the files back, essentially. Now, PreCovered drivers, which is actually interesting because we were studying this and to see what has actually happened, and this is actually predates the outbreak of COVID. And just to put in relationship here, that IT transformation was kind of ranked 2.1, where 1 is most important and 4 is least important, even before COVID. And that is, I would say, accelerated, where customers are now looking at how can we move stuff into the cloud, into public clouds, can we move into SaaS applications, and that has kind of been progressed faster. The evolution of threats is another thing that's very high on the radar to see, okay, do the threats look like, can we still live with the kind of traditional next-gen firewall? Are there other threats we need to be prepared for? The third part there was then consolidation, mainly not to reduce cost, but to reduce complexity in the security landscape. And then the additional kind of mobile and IoT devices. I would say that most of these have actually then been accelerated through the COVID-19 by allowing much faster than probably was planned for addition of other types of devices like mobiles and others in order to open up for access. I would say the evolution of threats is where the one that is kind of more threatening, because with this new landscape, there is a whole set of new attack vectors that is being exploited. And I can give you a couple of examples where customers have moved their workforce from home and doing things like moving people home with a desktop machine, and that desktop machine that is used to sit on the office is now using software that is kind of built for being in-house within the security perimeter. It's now in a home with a fairly unsecure Wi-Fi connection into some kind of public internet. So really finding solutions to cater for better security there is very high on the radar and should be looked into. Now, if we look at the secure access dynamics, I mean, we're not offering only what we call the kind of outside in. So to really walk you through this slide, what PulseSecure do today and what we mean when we talk about secure access is essentially 4 use cases. The primary use case now, and especially in COVID-19, is the one we call outside in. So outside in is basically anything on the outside that need access to something on the inside. Could be a traditional remote access use case, but we even have use cases here with cars, vending machines, trucks, and other things. So it's not only the traditional kind of user and device access. Now, outside in then led to customers coming to us and say, we actually have better control when users are on the outside than on the inside. So what if a user brings a laptop home over a weekend or go on a business trip, they come back to the company, then we need to do the same kind of thing when they're on the inside. So that's really our PulseSecure and our NAC solution. So that's really what we call the inside in. The inside in hasn't really had any huge growth during this period because people are working from home, but there will be a day when users are returning back into office and then have a prepared solution to take care of the same security problems once you get back to the office. We at PulseSecure see as crucial. Okay? So the outside in and the inside in was pretty much the only thing that was needed back in the days where the company had a data center and all the data was kind of safeguarded within my environment and my data center. But then we had this shift of data going out into the cloud, into IaaS like Azure and AWS. It could also be SaaS applications like Office 365 or Salesforce or Box. And that created the need for us to create both the use case of inside out, it's actually misspelled here, it should be inside out on this slide, of course for the user, but also this outside out. And I just want to take a moment to discuss that outside out because it's really where we say allow the traffic to go directly to this, but we still maintain a kind of a control session. And this also have a name within our solution called Cloud Secure. And actually, PulseSecure has been the savior for many customers also during COVID-19, as with the outside in, all the traffic is going from the client back into the corporate network and then potentially out to these services. That's not very effective. So this solution allows you to, as an administrator, to say that certain applications like Teams, like Zoom, like Skype for Business or other applications are allowed to go direct because I trust them, but I'm still going to do the same controls as for anything going to the internal applications. And if time admits, I will actually show you a demo of what I mean with all of this. So I think that's going to give you a better understanding. So really focused on the work from home is the outside in and the outside out kind of use case. So basically that's where we have more users today. And it's not only more users, it's a massive amount of more users. Now, the challenge, though, is that if you look at this very initially simplistic picture of this outside out, outside in, and these kind of use cases, it seems like a fairly simple thing. But the challenge is, as this evolves going forward, the challenge is that the use cases are expanding and the complexity is on the rise. So what that means essentially is that you need to programmatically sort out things like location awareness. Where will a user connect? Should they connect to the connection point in my corporate? Should they connect to a connection point in Azure, in AWS? And if I now have a mixture of applications, how do I get to these applications? Should I use a site-to-site connections between these places, or how should I go about doing that? And then how can I avoid basically exposing all of these attack surfaces that I'm now doing? So potentially in the past we had a couple of attack surfaces exposed. Now with this new world, building it the wrong way, there is a big risk that you're just expanding this to 100 times in terms of where an attacker could find data or access or try to breach your network. So essentially this is the kind of the foothold and the kind of baseline for why we have moved into adding new functionality and new services, because this really eradicates the whole discussion around this inside and outside. What you really want to do is create a solution with a zero trust access into applications. So what we have done is created a new service as well. So besides our traditional services like PulseSecure, that's been around for more than 15 years now, our PolicySecure that is there to take care of that inside, inside security of inside in and inside out. We have the new Pulse Zero Trust Access, which is essentially a SaaS service that is there to create this notion of access to anything independent of where you are. So that's really solving a couple of really fundamental problems. Where does a user connect? Always to the service. So you don't have to think about location awareness. Where do I connect? It's always to the service. All applications is hidden behind a gateway that is only listening to an enrolled client. All is secured by MTLS. So that's really an ecosystem where you have reduced the attack surface. You can even talk about what we call a dark cloud presence. So all the applications that you want to expose to your end users are not visible to anyone. And basically there is no attack surface left for any attacker that try to do anything towards you. And the other part with this, it's not really like a VPN. It's an always on feature. That means that whenever I need access to something, I could just get that access directly. So it's from a user experience perspective, very, very nice in order to just being able seamlessly to access internal resources, just as if you were sitting in the office. The other big thing here is also there's a shift. If you look at the Connect Secure, it's very focused around network-based access, like access to a subnet, potentially applications, but the real focus there is still very network-centric. If you look at something like Pulse Zero Trust Access, it's very application-centric. So it's all about publishing and giving access to an application. And this is where, that's the trend. That's where that the companies are requesting, functionality, because what happens is that in the cloud environments, in Azure or AWS, it's really focused on publishing this service, this application. While in the traditional data center, it's very focused around, this data center and the network layers. And then you can, of course, pinpoint some applications, but in reality, a lot of that means you want to have a full network pipe into that environment. With the Zero Trust Access, though, in order to facilitate the migration for companies, we're also allowing an application to be a subnet, an application to be a full FQDN. So, like a wild card. The intention is only to help migration. The intention in a Zero Trust environment is to be more specific, basically just giving access to the exact applications they should have. We have other pieces in our kind of portfolio as well, like our ADC, which is there just as a traditional ADC to fight the F5s and the A10s of the world, but also as an integrated part in the Pulse family to do global server load balancing, or OGS, like finding optimal gateway selection for the Pulse client, finding the closest gateway, the best gateway, things like load balancing, the NAC solution, etc. And then we have Pulse One as either a SaaS service or an on-prem solution to manage all the Pulse kind of systems, as well as Pulse Workspace, which is our flavor of an MDM, EMM, like the Intune or the AirWatch or Mobile Iron, specifically geared towards Android and iOS devices. So that's really the portfolio, and the new kid on the block is the Pulse Zero Trust Access. Now, if you look at these kind of challenges that I talked about before, there are a couple of things to think about, like use case limits, like application support, clientless access, MFA, and SSO. Does the solution have that? The other thing is then, if I can sort out that user authentication in a good way, allowing different types of access, what is then the next step? Well, it was around this threat vector. So can we do complete posture checking? Do we have granular control? Different types of access, like full layer 3, but maybe I don't want to give a full network access. Maybe I just want to give very granular access to some users, depending on what they look like. I'll give you an example here also on the compliance side. When somebody say they do compliance, the devil is in the detail. An example with us is that we always do what we call stateful. So it means we're not only doing a check when the user logs in and then it's over. I call that fire and forget. The challenge with doing these things is that what happens to a machine later on. So I'll give you an example with the MDM versus kind of PulseSecure. If I would use Intune or even our own workspace, and I want an iOS device is connecting, and I'm asking the MDM, is this a jailbroken device? The answer back might be 6 hours old, because in MDM, the normal check-in time is 8 hours. Could be even 8 hours old, potentially. But when you use Pulse, you can actually then check the jailbroken at the time of connection every time. So again, the devil is in the detail. When you talk about compliance, it should really be looked into. What does that mean, and to what level, and how does that increase my security? And then finally, the management. How do I then handle rule complexities and triage difficulty here? The other challenges is, of course, around performance, scale, and total cost of ownership. And in these COVID times, you've seen this traffic surge, SSL, TLS inspection impact, and the latency, connection drops, networking. Basically, the edge firewall has not really been able to handle it, or the incoming internet pipe, etc. So it really needs to be looked at holistically. It's not only our product that needs to scale out, but also the entire end-to-end solution needs to be there. So really being able to scale this out in a multi-layer deployment architecture, having the appliance module symmetry, meaning you can build clusters, you can build separate devices, you can build them with hardware, you can build them with virtual, you can build them in cloud, so you can really adopt the solution to what you need. So really the added expenditures that we see customers have to take on is adding a cluster per location or adding more capacity, and also many times I've oversubscribed licensing, so adding licenses as well. Okay. Now, as a summary, before I go into kind of my last piece of this, I just want to kind of reiterate that remote network is necessary. It comes with complexity. It comes with security kind of challenges. It needs to have kind of an integrated security strategy where you need to look at the endpoint, the zero trust access, the applications, and also if you're in the world where you moved into hybrid IT, how do I solve that problem? So maybe the PZTA, the Pulse Zero Trust Access is actually the better solution for you versus the traditional kind of access. So really focus there on the employee productivity, user experience, and flexibility. So selecting the right vendor here is a critical step. So let's move in my last minutes here into a demo to really, I personally think seeing is believing. So I have a machine here, and actually if I go to the back end of this, I can see that there is a session here. So you just want to kind of update this screen to make you see what happens here. So this is a demo of an always on VPN. So that means that even as the machine just booted up, it will set up a connection using a machine certificate to have a machine tunnel. What is the benefit? First of all, the machine is protected already at boot time. So even if I'm in a home Wi-Fi, it doesn't matter. This traffic from this machine is now already secured back to the corporate network. Now, I've done my compliance checks, and on top of this, the fact is that I also have the ability to keep my machines updated. So they could be allowed to access things like SCCM, they could access things like update servers, etc. Okay, so that's really part one of this. Now the user here, from an experience, he just want to log in and probably do some work. So I'm just playing a game here that I'm waking up in the morning and I'm opening the laptop. It had this machine connectivity. And as I then bring up my, I want to log in to actually do some work. The next thing that happens here is that the user machine essentially transitions the connection from where it was in terms of having a machine connection. You can see the Pulse client down on the bottom to the right actually starts working, and now there is a connection there. Now if I go back and update, you can see what happens is that this session has now transformed from being that machine connection into a user connection. And that means I also decorated it with more roles, and roles is king in our solution. I'm still fully compliant. And I have some details here even from profiling to say what type of device is this. Now the user probably just want to work. So as you saw, there was I just reused the Windows credentials. I checked for the machine certificate. I could have added an MFA if I wanted, but I haven't done this here. So really looking at the first use case being from home is outside in. So I want to access the intranet. It's not a very fancy intranet, but I could just make it there. It's an internal IP address. So I'm really using this outside in solution. Okay. The other thing would be accessing a SaaS application. So let's say I want to access Salesforce. Now here comes another feature of the PulseSecure. As I already have a session, it's already trusted. I get immediately single sign on into my Salesforce environment. Now, just to prove the pudding here, prove the fact. So let's just restart this and actually fail this machine. So there could be a lot of different failures, but I'm just using Notepad. You know, you can see immediately as I started Notepad, this is of course a fake. It could have been the firewall turned off. It could have been my security software is not updated, but I'm just using Notepad as the check here to make it simple for me to kind of force it. You can see what happened immediately was that I said, you have compliance issues, user, and then I can tell the user how to remediate this if there's a way to remediate. But more importantly, what happened behind the scenes here is that this user session now transformed from a fully compliant to a partially compliant. So this is the statefulness, and I lost some roles. So let's leave it like this and then try to go back. And even if I now try to go to my Salesforce account, it will just tell me you're not allowed. Okay, so you really have control over not letting these devices that are not compliant given access to these environments. Now, it's even as stateful as if I would fix this problem on the fly. We can just wait for this down here to go back. You can see it turned green. And if I just refresh this screen, I'm actually back in business. So really proving the kind of CARTA, this continuous checking of a device in a stateful manner that I view is extremely important. Okay. Now, the other thing that could then happen to a user is, of course, that they're going to go back into the corporate environment. So as I try to do kind of mimic that, if I would now come to the point work from home is over and I just disconnect from my home network, and next time I'm actually connecting to my enterprise network, what we have done is created this ecosystem that the client is again location aware, and in this case it's actually no longer connecting to my outside product, the Connect Secure. It's actually now with my Policy Secure. You can see how this looks exactly the same because essentially it's the same software, but this is what takes care of users when they're on-premise. So as you prepare for the on-premise, you now have a solution where the user just seamlessly get connected when they get off on-premise as well on their secure Wi-Fi or .1x or any kind of network infrastructure. The same rules apply, and as we're now federating everything, it doesn't matter. I can still have the same user experience of that user. And then in the end, what happens is that let's say that this user is now even going to visit somebody or going outside of their corporate or home network. So we normally, if I would go and visit any of you, you probably have not direct internet access, so you will hit into something called a captive portal. So even in an always-on VPN solution, we've created that if I run into a captive portal, we're bringing up an embedded browser, and what comes in here is, of course, could be anything. Could be the hotel, could be the airport, could be a guest at a company. I'm sneaky because I'm using our own guest access solution, of course, to show that. But it didn't need to be PulseSecure in this inner part. And I'm using my guest account here that I already have. I'm not going to make this into a long demo of the guest access solution. But just to prove the fact that even if there would be in a situation where I'm somewhere else, the Pulse solution then caters for the same user experience. And basically, I'm again back to this outside in scenario or outside out scenario because I'm again back connected to my PCS environment again. Okay, so really to show you the kind of what I mean, a day in life for a user. And by the way, I could have used my iPhone in the interim here as well. So that's really kind of concludes my presentation here. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, please reach out to our Disti that is running this event or coming back directly to PulseSecure. So really thanks for listening. Kap kun kap.